The worst leaders of the Civil War, Part 1. Most agree on the worst leaders of the Civil War. Pickett, McClellan, Sickles, and Bragg are often mentioned as the top suspects in this category. The political generals, those cashing in on a favor from high ranking politicians, and those seeking higher office are the ones that appear most often in this category. However, there are others. Here are some of those that, in my opinion, did not live up to expectations and were often responsible for getting their soldiers under their command slaughtered. If you agree or disagree, let me know. Confederate Major General Gideon Pillow, after gaining ground trying to cut an escape path for the Confederates during the February 1862 siege of Fort Donelson by Union forces led by Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, Pillow pulled the troops back to the fort to resupply them. As a result, he relinquished ground paid for with his soldiers' blood. Fearful of capture, he turned over command to Brigadier General Simon Bolivar Buckner and fled the fort on the night of February 16th in a boat that carried him across the Cumberland River to safety. Here are several other reasons I feel Gideon was a poor leader. Lack of military skill. Pillow lacked the military acumen and strategic vision required of a high ranking general. He had limited experience and training in military tactics and strategy, which hindered his ability to effectively lead his troops on the battlefield. Failures in battle. Pillow's command was marked by a series of military defeats and setbacks. One of the most notable examples was his performance during the Battle of Fort Donelson in February of 1862. His indecisiveness and poor judgment allowed Union forces under General Ulysses S. Grant to escape from the fort, resulting in a significant loss for the Confederacy. Poor leadership and discipline. Pillow was known for his impulsive and erratic behavior, which undermined his authority and led to a lack of discipline among his troops. His inability to instill confidence and discipline in his men further contributed to his failure as a commander. Conflict with subordinates. Pillow's confrontational and abrasive personality led to tensions and conflicts with his subordinate officers. The lack of cohesion and mutual respect within his command structure negatively impacted the effectiveness of his forces. Controversial reputation. Pillow's reputation was also marred by allegations of corruption and self serving behavior. Some accused him of prioritizing personal gain over the well being of his troops and the Confederate cause. Due to these shortcomings and failures, Pillow was ultimately relieved of command in the Western Theater and was not given significant military responsibilities for the remainder of the war. While he continued to hold various posts, his military career never recovered from the setbacks and criticism he faced during the early stages of the Civil War. Number two, Confederate Lieutenant General Theophilus Holmes. Confederate General Robert E. Lee transferred several generals, one of whom was Holmes, out of the Army of Northern Virginia following the 7 Days battles. Holmes had a talent for sitting on the sidelines and finding excuses not to attack, as he did at Malvern Hill. In his next post in the Trans Mississippi Department, he failed to protect the Mississippi River outposts and refused to reinforce Vicksburg. Here are some more reasons why Confederate Lieutenant General Theophilus Holmes was a poor leader. Lackluster leadership. Holmes lacked the strategic brilliance and decisive leadership necessary for a high ranking military commander. His actions and decisions on the battlefield were often questioned, and he struggled to effectively coordinate and lead his forces. Failed campaigns. Holmes had led several military campaigns during the American Civil War, but they were largely unsuccessful. One of his most notable failures was the Battle of Pea Ridge, also known as the Battle of Elkhorn Tavern, in March of 1862. His mishandling of the Confederate forces contributed to their defeat in this crucial battle in the Trans Mississippi Theater. Personality conflicts. Holmes had a reputation for being difficult to work with and often clashed with his subordinates and fellow generals. His abrasive and contentious nature created divisions and hindered effective cooperation among Confederate commanders. Strategic disputes. Holmes had disagreements with his superiors, particularly with General Edmund Kirby Smith, the overall Confederate commander in the Trans Mississippi Department. These disputes led to a breakdown in communication and coordination, further impacting the Confederate war effort in the region. Limited success in defense. While Holmes was not particularly successful in offensive operations, he did have moderate success in defensive actions. However, his overall performance and strategic abilities were considered subpar compared to other Confederate generals. Reassignment and removal. Due to his lack of success and leadership issues, Holmes was eventually relieved of his command in the Trans Mississippi Department in 1863. He was later reassigned to less significant roles for the remainder of the war. While Theophilus Holmes had a respectable military career prior to the Civil War, his performance as a Confederate general was below par, and he faced criticism for his leadership, strategic decision making, and interpersonal conflicts with other Confederate leaders. Number three, Nathaniel P. Banks. Banks fought the entire war without contributing much to the Union cause. A member of Congress, former governor of Massachusetts, and president of the Illinois Central Railroad before the war, Banks was an essential player on the Republican team. This translated into a general's commission and command. He was beaten in the Shenandoah Valley repeatedly in 1862, becoming the negative example of what not to do as a general. He became known among the Confederate troops as Commissary Banks for his army's habit of leaving behind its supply trains and depots when beaten. Jackson seemed to have Banks's number. At Cedar Mountain, Jackson again took him to task. This ended Banks' contribution to the Union cause in the Eastern Theater. When it comes to evaluating his abilities as a commander, Banks had both successes and failures during the war, and opinions about his leadership vary. In my opinion, he fell short in several key areas. Here are some reasons why I consider Banks to be a bad commander. Military defeats. Banks had several significant military defeats during the Civil War, notably his disastrous Red River campaign in 1864, resulting in a retreat of Union forces after a failed attempt to capture Shreveport, Louisiana. The campaign's failure was partly due to Banks's lack of strategic foresight and inability to adapt to changing circumstances. Lack of aggressiveness. Critics argue that Banks was not aggressive enough as a commander. He often showed reluctance to take bold actions or engage in offensive maneuvers, which hindered the effectiveness of his campaigns and allowed Confederate forces to exploit weaknesses in Union positions. Inadequate leadership. Banks was accused of lacking strong leadership skills. He struggled to inspire confidence in his subordinates and had difficulty commanding the loyalty and respect of his officers and soldiers. Political appointments. Banks' military career was partly influenced by his political connections rather than solely based on his military prowess. His rise to higher ranks was due in part to his political affiliations and influence, which led some to question his qualifications as a military leader. Failure to secure New Orleans. When Banks was in command of the Department of the Gulf, he failed to secure complete control over the strategic city of New Orleans. Despite capturing the city early in the war, he was unable to exert the full authority over the region, allowing Confederate sympathizers and resistance to persist. Overall, mixed performance. While Banks had some success, his overall record as a commander was mixed. He had both moments of triumph and periods of failure, making it difficult for historians and military experts to reach a consensus on his abilities. While some view Banks as a bad commander due to his shortcomings and military defeats, others may emphasize his contributions and accomplishments during the Civil War. Unfortunately, there are many more examples. Like and follow to see part two of the worst leaders of the American Civil War. It's your history. Learn it, know it, love it.